The midnight blue Ferrari screamed through São Paulo's exclusive Jardins district like a bullet tearing through silk. Alexander Montafior gripped the steering wheel with manicured fingers, his perfectly styled hair defying the convertible's open top as he accelerated through an amber light. The morning sun caught his designer sunglasses, creating twin mirrors that reflected a world he believed existed solely for his pleasure. At 34, Alexander had never known want, never tasted failure, never questioned whether the universe might have other plans for him. The Montafior real estate empire stretched across 3 continents, and he wore that legacy-like armor against reality. "Did you finalize the Singapore deal?" His voice cut through his Bluetooth earpiece with the precision of a scalpel. He barely glanced at the crosswalk ahead, where pedestrians scattered like leaves before his approach. "I need those signatures. By noon, Paulo, or we lose our position to Chang." The Ferrari's tires shrieked as he swerved around a delivery truck, missing a cyclist by inches. The man's creative hand gestures followed in his wake, but Alexander had already dismissed him from existence. Incompetence surrounded him everywhere he looked. His phone buzzed against the leather seat. His mother's name flashed on the screen for the 3rd time that morning. She'd been unusually persistent lately, demanding a family dinner that apparently couldn't wait. Alexander let it ring through to voicemail, just like the others. Whatever maternal crisis had captured her attention could wait until after his board meeting. The Montafior Tower rose before him like a monument to his family's dominance. 48 stories of glass and steel bearing their name in letters large enough to be seen from space. But as Alexander pulled into his reserved parking space, something felt wrong. Reporters clustered around the entrance like vultures sensing carrion. He tossed his keys to the valet without a glance and strode toward his private elevator, sunglasses firmly in place despite being indoors. The familiar weight of his Armani suit felt like a second skin, a barrier between himself and the world's expectations. "Mr. Montafior." A reporter broke through the security line, microphone thrust forward, like a weapon. "Is it true that Montafior Enterprises is facing a hostile takeover?" Alexander's hand froze halfway to the elevator button. The lobby's marble floor seemed to shift beneath his Italian leather shoes. "What did you say? Sources say your father's company is vulnerable after 3 failed projects and the São Paulo Heights scandal." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that sounded like a death knell. Alexander stepped inside, his composed mask slipping for just a moment before he regained control. "No comment," he said, his voice surprisingly steady as the doors whispered shut. But inside his mind, panic clawed at the edges of his certainty. A takeover? Impossible. His father would have warned him, unless Victor couldn't. The old man had been acting strangely at their last meeting, distracted and somber, in a way that Alexander had dismissed as another dramatic mood. The elevator climbed toward the executive floor, toward Alexander's sanctuary, where he controlled everything and everyone. His smartphone buzzed again. His mother's name appeared, and with an exasperated sigh, he finally answered. "Mother, I'm walking into a meeting. Alexander, you need to come home now." Her voice carried a tightness he'd never heard before, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. "Your father's had a heart attack." The world tilted. For once in his privileged life, Alexander Montafior was speechless. "Did you hear me?" His mother's voice cracked through the phone. "He's asking for you. And he says it's about the company's future." The elevator reached the 48th floor, but Alexander's world had already begun its descent. 30 minutes later, Alexander stood in the doorway of his childhood home, the mansion's familiar grandeur now feeling like a mausoleum. The family doctor emerged from his father's bedroom, his expression carrying the weight of decades spent delivering difficult news to wealthy families. "He's stable but weak," the doctor said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "No visitors except immediate family, and absolutely no business talk." Alexander almost laughed at the absurdity. No business talk with Victor Montafior was like asking the ocean to stop producing waves. His mother appeared in the hallway, her perfect makeup incongruous. With the worry lines that had carved themselves into her forehead overnight, "He's waiting for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And Alexander, be prepared. There's something your father needs to tell you." The sick room smelled of antiseptic and expensive cologne, a combination that turned Alexander's stomach. Victor Montafior lay propped against silk pillows. His commanding presence diminished, but not extinguished. Even illness couldn't completely dull the sharp intelligence in his eyes. "You took your time," Victor said. His voice raspy, but still carrying the edge that had intimidated business rivals for decades. "Traffic," Alexander replied, taking the chair beside the bed. The leather creaked under his weight. "What's this?" "About a takeover?" Victor's laugh turned into a cough that shook his entire frame. "Always straight to business. You're my son, all right?" He wiped his mouth with a monogrammed handkerchief. "The reporters are vultures circling because they smell blood." Victor pushed himself up slightly, wincing with the effort. "Listen to Esed. Me carefully, Alexander. Everything I've built is at risk. Not just from outsiders, but from our own mistakes." "Our mistakes?" Alexander frowned, his defensive walls rising. "You mean the São Paulo Heights project?" "That was Paulo's fault. He miscalculated the environmental impact reports." "I mean your mistakes," Victor cut in, his voice strengthening with anger. "Your arrogance, your recklessness. The company's reputation is suffering because of how you conduct yourself." Alexander stiffened in his chair. "My conduct has nothing to do with failed construction projects. It has everything to do with it." Victor's voice filled the room like thunder. "Do you think I don't hear about the scandals? The affairs? The lawsuits settled quietly? You think our investors don't notice when the heir apparent treats the world like his personal playground?" "I close deals," Alexander said coldly, standing to pace toward the window. Outside, the gardens bloomed in careful perfection, maintained by staff his father had employed for decades. "They make us money, and you're losing us allies," Victor countered. "Business isn't just numbers, son. It's relationships. Trust. Respect. Things you've been burning through like gasoline." Alexander turned back, suddenly wary of the resignation creeping into his father's voice. "Why are you telling me this now? We can handle a takeover attempt. We always have. Not this one." Victor's voice softened, and Alexander heard something that chilled him more than anger ever could. Defeat. There's only one solution. One way to secure a partnership that will save everything. "What kind of partnership?" "Oliveira International." The name hit Alexander like a physical blow. He gripped the windowsill, his knuckles white. "Oliveira? Your oldest rival?" "My oldest friend once," Victor sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "And now, our only hope. He's willing to merge companies rather than see us fall to overseas investors." "And what's the catch?" Alexander asked, recognizing the trap closing around him. Victor met his son's eyes. "Marcos has a condition. Merger must be solidified by marriage." Alexander's laugh was harsh in the quiet room. "Marriage? What century is this? And who exactly am I supposed to marry?" "Marcos doesn't have children." "His niece," Victor said quietly. "He raised her after his sister died. She's his heir." The laughter died in Alexander's throat. "I'm not marrying some unknown woman to save your legacy." "Not unknown," Victor said, his voice barely audible. "You've met her, Marina Oliveira." The name hung in the air between them like a curse. Marina Oliveira. A ghost from Alexander's past, a girl with fierce eyes and an even fiercer spirit. The girl he'd tormented mercilessly throughout their years at São Paulo's most elite private academy. The girl who'd eventually transferred to another school to escape him. Marina, Alexander whispered, memories flooding back like a dam bursting. "That's impossible." "She's Marcus's heir," Victor repeated. "And your future bride, if you want to save this family." Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him again. "And if I refuse?" Victor's expression hardened, becoming the ruthless businessman who'd built an empire from nothing. "Then you get nothing. Not the company, not the inheritance. Nothing." Before Alexander could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. The bedroom door swung open, and there she stood. Marina Oliveira was no longer the awkward girl he remembered. She was a striking woman in a tailored business suit, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob, that framed features that had transformed from pretty to breathtaking. But her eyes hadn't changed. They still flashed with that same defiance when they locked. "On to his, Alexander," she said, her voice cool and professional as winter rain. "It's been a long time." Alexander Montafior, master of boardrooms and bedrooms, found himself utterly speechless for the second time that day. Marina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I understand we have a marriage to discuss." The Montafior family's private dining room could have housed a small apartment. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the antique mahogany table, where four people sat in what could only be described as the world's most uncomfortable business dinner. Alexander straightened his tie for the third time in 5 minutes, his usual confidence shattered by the woman sitting across from him. Marina Oliveira delicately sliced her filet mignon, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Marcos Oliveira observed the proceedings like a chess master, anticipating his opponent's next move. His bald head gleamed under the chandelier's light, and his shrewd eyes missed nothing. "The merger makes perfect sense," Victor Montafior was saying, his color better after 2 days of mandated rest. "Our companies complement each other. Montafior's urban developments, Oliveira's sustainable architecture, and international connections." "Indeed," Marcos agreed, his deep voice resonating in the vast room. "Together, we could reshape São Paulo's skyline for the next generation." Alexander cleared his throat. "And this marriage arrangement that's non-negotiable?" Marina sat down, her knife with deliberate precision. "My uncle believes in the old ways, family bonds to seal business bonds. And you're just going along with this?" Alexander couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. Marina met his gaze directly, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Steel wrapped in silk. "I understand what's at stake." "Do enlighten me," Alexander challenged, leaning forward. 5,000 jobs, she replied without hesitation. The livelihood of every employee at both companies. The completion of the East Side Renewal Project, which would revitalize a struggling neighborhood. The Amazonian Preservation Initiative. That needs both our companies' resources. She took a sip of water, her movements graceful and controlled. "Should I continue?" Alexander felt a strange sensation in his chest, something like respect, though he quickly suppressed it. This wasn't the frightened girl who'd fled São Paulo Academy 15 years ago. "You've done your homework," he admitted. Marina's smile was razor-sharp. "Unlike some people, I don't make decisions based on impulse or ego." Barb hit its mark. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Careful, Marina. You're still the same little girl who ran away when things got difficult."
Oh.
The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marina's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and, when she looked up, her eyes blazed with fury. "Ran away?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Is that what you call it when a 14-year-old girl transfers schools to escape daily humiliation?"
Hey, Marcos?
Oliveira's expression darkened. "Alexander. Perhaps you should explain what my niece is referring to." Alexander felt the walls closing. He'd never told his father about his behavior at school, never mentioned the girl he'd made cry almost daily for sport, the sick pleasure he'd taken in her tears, the way he'd convinced other students to join in his cruelty. "Teenage foolishness," he said dismissively. "We were kids." "Kids," Marina repeated, setting down her fork entirely. "You were 17. Alexander. Old enough to know better." She turned to address the table, her voice steady, despite the fire in her eyes. "Would you like to know what your son did to me, Mr. Montafior?" Marina Marcos warned gently. "No, uncle. They need to know." "What kind of man they're asking me to marry?" She faced Alexander directly. "You made my life hell for 3 years. You convinced the entire school that I was scholarship trash who didn't belong. You had your friends pour juice on my uniform, lock me in supply closets, spread rumors that I was mentally unstable." Victor Montafior's face grew pale. "Is this true?" Alexander's throat felt tight. The memories came flooding back, but from this perspective, they looked different, uglier. He'd been the king of his small world, and she'd been an easy target. Smart, proud, but without the social armor of wealth and connections. "I was 17, he said finally. "I was stupid. You were cruel, Marina corrected. And the worst part wasn't the bullying itself. It was how you'd smile at me afterward, like it was all a game to you. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Alexander remembered those smiles, remembered the thrill of power he'd felt. He'd been king of his domain, and she'd been the one person who'd never bowed to his will. Had infuriated him, challenged him, made him want to break her spirit. I'm not that person anymore, he said, the words feeling inadequate. Aren't you? Marina's laugh was bitter. From what I've read in the society pages, you've simply found new targets. Models, actresses, business partners, different faces. Same cruelty. Alexander started to protest, but the words died in his throat. She wasn't wrong. He'd never grown out of taking what he wanted. Consequences be damned. Marcos cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the practical arrangements. There's nothing to discuss, Marina said firmly. I won't marry him, Uncle. Find another way to save the company. She started to rise, but Victor's voice stopped. Her? There's no other way, my dear. The hostile takeover will proceed within 30 days. Both companies will be stripped for parts, sold to overseas investors. Every project will be canceled. Every employee will lose their job. Marina sank back into her chair, her composure finally cracking. There has to be another solution. If there were, don't you think we would have found it? Marcos asked gently. This merger is our only hope, and it requires a bond that can't be broken by market forces or boardroom politics. Alexander watched Marina's internal struggle play out across her features. He saw the moment she made her decision, saw her spine straighten with resolve. 1 year, she said finally. A marriage contract for 1 year. Long enough to stabilize the merger, then we divorce quietly. 5 years, Alexander countered, surprising himself. It takes time to build investor confidence. 2 years, Marina shot back, and we live separately. This is a business arrangement. Nothing more, agreed Alexander said, though something in his gut twisted at the idea of keeping her at arm's length. Victor and Marcos exchanged glances. The contracts will be drawn up tomorrow, Victor said. The engagement will be announced next week. Marina stood gracefully, smoothing her skirt. If we're doing this, we do it properly. No scandals, no affairs, no embarrassing headlines. Can you handle that, Alexander? He met her challenging gaze. Can you handle being married to the man who made your life hell? Marina's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You're not the same frightened boy who needed to hurt others to feel powerful. And I'm not the same girl who couldn't fight back. She walked to the door, then paused. Don't mistake my agreement for forgiveness, Alexander. I'm doing this for 5,000 families who don't deserve to pay for your father's mistakes or your reputation. After she left, the room felt empty, charged with the electricity of their confrontation. She's not what I expected, Alexander. Admitted Victor's expression was unreadable. No, son, she's exactly what you need. 3 weeks later, Alexander stood on the terrace of the São Paulo Country Club, nursing a whiskey and watching Marina work the engagement party crowd like a master politician. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her look like starlight, and every conversation she entered seemed to orbit around her natural magnetism. She's impressive, commented Eduardo Santos, Alexander's closest friend and business partner. Nothing like the scared little girl you described from school, Xander. Took another sip of whiskey, feeling it burn down his throat. No, she's not. The party had been Marina's idea, executed with military precision. She'd handled the guest list, the venue, the media coverage, everything designed to project an image of unity and strength for both companies' investors. She'd even managed to make their fake romance look convincing from a distance. Up close was a different story. Alexander, Marina, appeared at his elbow, her smile bright and artificial. Senator Caldera wants to discuss the environmental impact assessments for the merger. Her hand slipped through his arm with practiced ease, but he felt the tension. In her fingers, he'd been playing this game for 3 weeks now, and every touch felt like a negotiation. Of course, darling, he replied, matching her performance. Anything for you? As they walked toward the senator, Marina's voice dropped to a whisper. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you're trying to solve a puzzle? It's making people nervous? She was right. He'd been studying her all evening, trying to reconcile this poised woman with the girl from his memories. Every interaction revealed new depths, new layers of competence and intelligence that both impressed and unsettled him. The evening proceeded, in a blur of handshakes, carefully orchestrated photos, and conversations that felt like chess matches. Marina never missed a step, never let her mask slip. She was everything Alexander wasn't, diplomatic where he was blunt, considerate where he was selfish. It was maddening. Near midnight, the last guests finally departed, leaving Alexander and Marina alone on the terrace. The city lights twinkled below them like fallen stars, and the November air carried the scent of jasmine from the club's gardens. Marina kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. That was exhausting. You were perfect, Alexander said, and meant it. I've never seen anyone work a room like that. She glanced at him suspiciously. Don't sound so surprised. Some of us learned to survive without Daddy's money smoothing the way. The comment stung because it was true. How did you do it? Go from that scared girl to this. Marina walked too. The terrace railing, her bare feet silent on the stone. I had to. After I left São Paulo Academy, I spent 2 years in therapy learning that your cruelty said more about you than it did about me. Alexander joined her at the railing, maintaining careful distance. Marina, about what happened back then? Don't. She held up a hand. Don't apologize now because you need something from me. It's too late for that. Then when? The question surprised him with its intensity. When is the right time to tell you that I've regretted those years every day since? Marina turned to face him, and in the moonlight, he could see the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. Have you? Or do you just regret getting caught? I regret hurting you, he said quietly. Regret being the kind of person who found pleasure in someone else's pain. Why? Her voice was barely audible. Why did you do it? Alexander had asked himself that question 1,000 times over the years, because you were everything I wasn't. Smart without showing off. Kind without expecting anything back.
Oh.
You had. Something I couldn't buy or take or manipulate. He paused, struggling with the admission. I think I was jealous. Marina's laugh was hollow. Jealous? Of the scholarship girl who ate lunch alone? Of the girl who knew who she was without needing everyone else's approval? Alexander turned to face the city. I built my entire identity around being better than everyone else. You never seemed to care about that game, and it drove me crazy. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years hanging between them. I used to have nightmares about you, Marina said finally. Night for years. After I transferred, dreams where I was still that helpless girl, and you were still the boy who could destroy me with a word. Alexander felt something twist in his chest. And now I know better. Marina's voice strengthened. I know that bullies are just scared children in expensive suits. Is that what you think I am? A scared child? In the moonlight, I think you're a man who's never learned to be alone with himself, who needs constant validation that he's special, important, worth something. The assessment was so accurate, it felt like a physical blow. And what about you? What do you need, Marina? To not need anything from anyone, she replied without hesitation. To be strong enough that no one can ever make me feel small again. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is better than vulnerability, Alexander wanted to argue. To tell her that wasn't living, but the words felt hypocritical coming from him. Wasn't he just as isolated in his tower of privilege and power? Quite a pair, he said instead. Two people afraid of being human? Marina's smile was sad. Maybe that's why this arrangement will work. We both know not to expect too much. As they prepared to leave, Alexander caught her arm gently. Marina, I need you to know something. What I did to you in school, it's the thing I'm most ashamed of in my life. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back at his face. Shame doesn't change the past, Alexander. Oh, but maybe it can change the future. Marina pulled away, slipping her shoes back on. The future is what we make it. Ours has. An expiration date. As she walked away, Alexander stayed on the terrace, staring out at the city his family had helped build. For the first time in his life, the view felt empty, the lights cold and distant. 2 days later, Alexander's world shifted again. He was in his office reviewing merger documents when his assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Montafior, there's a call from London. Something about a private investigation." The voice on the phone was crisp, professional. "Mr. Montafior, this is Rebecca Chen from Kingsley Investigations. You requested background information on Marina Oliveira." Alexander's blood went cold. He hadn't requested any investigation, which meant someone else had. "I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. Our client was very specific. Complete background, financial records, personal relationships." A pause. "The report reveals some interesting information about Ms. Oliveira's time in London." "What kind of information? Perhaps we should discuss this in person." As Alexander hung up, a terrible realization washed over him. Someone was digging into Marina's past, looking for ammunition. And given the timing of the engagement announcement, there was only one person with both motive and resources to do it: his own father. The thought made him sick. Victor was still playing chess while Alexander had been learning to see Marina as a person rather than a pawn. Alexander grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Marina needed to know what was coming, and for the first time since this arrangement began, he found himself genuinely worried about her. Not because of what it would mean for the merger, but because he couldn't bear the thought of her being hurt again, especially not by his family. Alexander found Marina in her uncle's office, surrounded by architectural plans and financial projections. She looked up as he burst through the door, her expression shifting from surprise to concern when she saw his face. "Alexander, what's wrong?" "Need to talk. Privately." He glanced at Marcos, who was studying them both with shrewd eyes. "I'll give you a moment," Marcos said, gathering his papers. "Up, Marina. We need those environmental assessments approved by 5. After her uncle left, Marina stood and smoothed her skirt. "You look terrible. What happened?" "Someone hired a private investigator to dig into your background. The report is finished." Marina went very still, her face losing all color. "Who?" "I think it was my father." Alexander closed the distance between them, noting how she instinctively stepped back. "Marina, whatever they found, we can handle it together." "Together?" Marina's laugh was bitter. "Alexander, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Your family will use anything to maintain control. Tell me what they found," he said gently. "Let me help." Marina walked to the window, her shoulders rigid. "With tension, you can't help with this. No one can. Try me." She was quiet for so long that Alexander thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I was engaged in London 3 years ago to a man named James Whitmore." Alexander felt something twist in his stomach, though he couldn't name it. "What happened?" "He was everything I thought I wanted. Successful, charming, from a good family." Marina's reflection in the window looked haunted. "The engagement was announced in the Times. My uncle was so proud." "Marina, he was also married," she continued, her voice hollow. "Had been for 5 years. To a woman who was pregnant with their second child." Alexander felt the air leave his lungs. Jesus. "I found out 2 weeks before the wedding. His wife called me." Marina turned from the window, and Alexander saw tears. "Threatening to spill? She begged me not to destroy her family. Said she'd known about the other women, but this was different, because he was planning to leave her." "What did you do?" "I called off the engagement immediately. Publicly, the scandal was enormous." Marina's voice grew stronger, more defiant. "London papers made me out to be a hysterical woman who couldn't keep a man. His family painted me as a gold digger who'd fabricated the whole thing when I realized he wouldn't divorce his wife." Alexander moved closer, his hands clenched at his sides. "They destroyed your reputation to protect his. Money and connections." "Always win," Marina said with bitter acceptance. "I came back to Brazil with nothing. No career prospects, no savings. My uncle took me in, gave me a position in his company, helped me rebuild. That's why you're so concerned about the merger," Alexander realized. "It's not just about the jobs. It's about proving yourself. It's about not being that helpless girl ever again." Marina wiped her eyes, straightening her spine. "And now, your father will use this to destroy me all over again." Alexander felt a rage building in his chest unlike anything he'd ever experienced. No, he won't. Alexander, be realistic. Once this information becomes public, it won't become public. Alexander pulled out his phone, dialing his father's number with sharp, angry movements. What are you doing? Fixing this. The call connected. Father, we need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, Alexander stormed into his father's study, Marina. Close behind him, Victor Montafior sat behind his mahogany desk. The investigation report spread before him like a battle plan. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, Victor said calmly. Though I expected you to come alone, how could you do this? Alexander's voice shook with fury. How could you investigate the woman I'm supposed to marry? Due diligence, Victor replied coolly. I needed to know what skeletons might emerge during the merger process. You mean what ammunition you could use to control her? Victor's eyes sharpened. Watch your tone, son. I'm trying to protect this family's interests. Marina's interests. Are this family's interests now? Alexander shot back. She's going to be my wife. A temporary arrangement, Victor corrected. Don't get sentimental about a business transaction. Marina stepped forward, her composure perfect despite the circumstances. Mr. Montafior, what exactly do you want? Smart girl, Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. What assurance? That you understand your place in this arrangement. No demands beyond what we've agreed to. No attempts to claim permanent stake in company decisions. And if I don't agree to your terms, Victor gestured to the report. This information becomes public. Your reputation, already damaged in London, would be destroyed here as well. The merger would proceed, but you'd be removed from any position of authority. Alexander felt something snap inside him. That's enough. Alexander, Marina warned. No, Marina, I'm done with this. Alexander turned to face his father fully. You want to know about skeletons? Let's talk about yours. Victor's expression darkened. Careful, son. The São Paulo Heights project didn't fail because of environmental miscalculations. Alexander continued, his voice steady and cold. It failed because you cut corners on foundation inspections to meet deadline bonuses. The building that collapsed in Rio wasn't structural failure. It was criminal negligence. You don't know what you're talking about, Victor said, but Alexander saw fear flicker in his eyes. I've known for 2 years. I've kept quiet because you're my father, but I won't let you destroy an innocent woman to cover your mistakes. Marina was staring at Alexander in shock. Alexander, stop. The merger isn't about saving both companies, Alexander continued relentlessly. It's about hiding your liability behind Oliveira's clean reputation. You need Marina more than she needs you. Victor's face had gone ashen. If you expose this, you destroy everything. Your inheritance, your future, then that's what I'll do, Alexander said firmly. Marina, the choice is yours. Stay with the merger and take control, or walk away and I'll make sure you're compensated fairly. Marina looked between father and son, her mind clearly racing. What are you asking me to do?
Asking me.
Alexander said simply. For once in your life, trust someone else to fight for you. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Marina nodded slowly. Mr. Montafior, she said, addressing Victor with ice-cold formality. Here are my terms. I will proceed with the marriage and the merger, but I want 40% ownership in the combined company, not the 20% we discussed. I want full authority over all environmental and social impact decisions. That investigation report disappears forever. Victor looked like he'd swallowed poison. Those terms are unacceptable. Then the merger fails, Marina replied calmly. I'll personally ensure that every investor knows exactly why. Alexander watched his father calculate the odds, saw the moment he realized he'd lost. Fine, Victor said through gritted teeth, but the marriage contract remains unchanged. 2 years. Actually, Alexander said, surprising everyone, including himself, I'd like to renegotiate that term as well. Marina turned to him, her expression unreadable. What are you saying? Alexander took a deep breath, knowing he was about to jump off a cliff with no guarantee of wings. I'm saying maybe we don't put an expiration date on this. Maybe we see where it goes. Alexander, this is a business arrangement, Marina said carefully. It started that way, he agreed. But somewhere along the way it became something else, for me at least. Marina's eyes searched his face. What are you really asking me? I'm asking if you think the man standing here is the same boy who hurt you 15 years ago. Marina was quiet for a long moment, her gaze never leaving his. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. No, he's not. Then maybe, Alexander said, stepping closer, we could try being real with each other. No contracts, no expiration dates. Just two people who've spent their whole lives wearing masks, finally brave enough to take them off. Victor cleared his throat impatiently. This is all very touching, but we have documents to sign. The documents can wait, Marina said. Never. Breaking eye contact with Alexander, I have a question for you first. Ask me anything. If I say yes to this, to giving us a real chance, what happens when you realize I'm not perfect? When the novelty wears off and you remember that I'm just the scholarship girl who ate lunch alone? Alexander reached for her hands, relieved when she didn't pull away. Then I'll remember that you're also the woman who saved 5,000 jobs, who turned her pain into strength, who's braver and smarter and better than I'll ever be. Alexander, I love you, he said simply. I think I've been falling in love with you since that first dinner, watching you care more about strangers' livelihoods than your own comfort. You don't have to love me back, not yet. But don't walk away because you're afraid of being hurt again. Marina's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of pain. You impossible man, she whispered. Do you have any idea how? Much courage it takes to trust someone again after they've broken you. Then let me earn it, Alexander said. Every day, for as long as you'll let me. Marina looked down at their joined hands, then back at his face. The merger still happens. The company still gets saved, of course. And if this thing between us doesn't work, we handle it like adults. No drama, no revenge. Agreed. And you have to promise me something else, Marina said, her voice growing stronger. Promise me you'll keep becoming the man you are, right? Now, not the boy you were, not the playboy the papers write about. This man who chose to protect me instead of his inheritance. Alexander brought her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust. Marina smiled then, the first truly unguarded smile he'd seen from her. Then yes, Alexander Montafior. Let's see where this goes. Victor's chair creaked as he stood. Are you quite finished with this romantic theater? We have a company to save? Alexander and Marina turned to face him, but they didn't let go of each other's hands. Actually, Father, Alexander said with a smile that was all teeth, we're just getting started. 6 months later, Alexander stood in the same garden where he'd first seen Marina as an adult, but everything had changed. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dancing shadows on the grass, where 200 guests had gathered for a wedding that had started as a business arrangement and become something neither of them had expected. Marina walked toward him in a simple white dress that made her look like starlight, her smile radiant and real. No cameras this time, no performance for investors. Just two people who'd learned that sometimes the greatest courage is letting someone else see who you really are. Having second thoughts? She asked as she reached him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Only about whether I deserve this, Alexander replied, taking her hands. Lucky for you, Marina said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. I've decided. You do. As the ceremony began, Alexander thought about the boy he'd been and the man he'd become, about masks and courage and the strange alchemy that could transform cruelty into compassion, fear into love. He'd spent his whole life taking what he wanted without thought for the cost. But Marina had taught him that the best things in life weren't taken at all. They were earned. One small act of trust at a time. Asterisk the end, asterisk, asterisk, like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know. In the comments, we love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.